All right, and we do have the Old Friend DLC has finally both been announced, confirmed, and revealed to Total War Warhammer 1. We have the Old Friend being the mighty Krell. As you can see here, he looks beautiful. Has a nice amount of blush going on in his eyes. I love what he's done with the smoky approach to the eyelashes. It really kind of brings out his natural blues. But he is, of course, the old friend of Heinrich Himmler here. So in this video, all we're going to really be doing is going through Heinrich Himmler. We're going to be going through the unit of Krell himself. I'm actually going to pause this because he's about to break apart. And then we're going to go into the lore behind Krell. He is called the Old Friend because he was originally summoned up by Nagash. He was we'll go into this in the lore in a second here, but he was a tribal war chief, a Norskin war chief more or less, and he was a champion of Khorne. So you can already imagine how we've talked about how Khorne is, the best and baddest of all of the Chaos Gods when it comes to melee. You can imagine how a Norskin berserker type Khorne infused champion now channeled into the undead could be a terrifying opponent. Krell from tabletop is actually a very monstrous unit in the sense that he does just a crap ton of damage in melee, and they've seemed to have done this as a good justice to this as well here. Krell is armored, he has armor piercing, and he's a damage dealer. I'm going to press a little slow-mo on bad boy Krell here so you can get a good animation of him. He's got a lot of really cool, just like a lot of aesthetic not capability, but aesthetic presentation on his character. Just like in tabletop, he has one of maybe the coolest models in at least the undead and chaos range, but in the Warhammer range as a whole. I just fucking love it. Look at that axe. It's like spoop. Oh man, that's spot on what it's like on the actual miniature, which we'll see later in this video, so do stay tuned for that. But as you can see, he's slowly crumbling apart because he is summoned by Heinrich. He has Lord of the Undeath ability, and that pops him up on the board here so you can play around with him. He will degrade just like when you summon up a Manticore or anything else of the sort. But he has Unbinding, of course, since he is undead. He is undead. He can hide in forests. The typical kind of shtick you'd expect from a unit so far. But he has the ability to encourage, which is nifty because they always talk about how in tabletop how he is always with Graveguard, and when Nagash actually gets killed by Sigmar, they talk about him leading a unit of Graveguard through the line of the dwarves and out, and just terrorizing the countryside at the same time. So he's kind of a very big pinion in the undead world, and becomes one of the Mortarch of Despair in the end times, which is one of the Dark Lords of Nagash. So you've got the fact that he does cause terror and he does cause fear. So hopefully we're going to see a fleshed out model here. Right now, this is currently the iteration of Krell, and they have told us that Krell will actually, they just said, like, this is it for now. So it makes us kind of believe that maybe down the line in Norskin DLC, we'll see more of an actual legendary Lord unit for Krell itself. Because he doesn't have any of his weapon and his armor from lore. And we'll go into that when we do the lore blurb, because it'll just make a little bit more sense to kind of touch those together. But he does cause fear and terror, as well as has a 20% magic resistance and a 15% missile resistance. But you can already see he's got Master of the Undead, which replenishes his hit points quite a bit. And he's got an armor-piercing giant axe, which gives him quite a bit of weapon strength. But he's a damage dealer. He's armored. He's armor-piercing. Kind of what you'd exactly expect from Krell. In tabletop, he's very much a character assassin. I mean, he can completely destroy droves of low-cost units as well, because he is quite the girthy one. But this kind of covers Krell from the Total War Warhammer's perspective, but let's actually go into him from a lore perspective as well. We do have a little blurb here from the 8th edition Vampire Accounts book that we'll read real quick, and I'll go into some other lore that I know about him, because Krell has been around in Warhammer for years. Just like Nagash, Nagash was there at like the very beginning, more or less. And Krell has kind of been there right alongside with him, even with this nice little Corinthian-style Greek helmet here, which, is not the way all Greek hoplites looked, only after a certain point. But let's kind of go into that actual lore blurb, and we'll talk about some more from there. And we'll really just kind of, we'll jump into this as if we do most of the other lore blurbs that we do. We'll read this straight from the book. So this is Krell, the Lord of Undeath. Krell was a mighty chaos champion in the days before the birth of Sigmar, the ruler of a barbarian tribe that had been corrupted by the chaos god Khorne. Krell carved out an empire amongst the barbarian tribes of the north, and then turned against the dwarfs of the south. He allied with the night goblins that stormed the dwarf strongholds of Carrick Ungor and Carrick Barn, and his name is recorded many times in the Great Book of Grudges. Though he was eventually slain by the dwarf hero Grumbald Ironhelm during the assault of Carrick Hadron. Krell's followers carried away his body and buried it in a Barrow tomb. Nearly 1500 years later, Nagash came upon the tomb when he was searching for the crown of sorcery. Easily translating the runic inscriptions on the tomb walls, Nagash realized that this Barrow held the remains of a mighty champion. Nagash was much pleased, and instantly set about raising this prized hero to fight in his armies. Krell was placed in command of one of Nagash's undead legions when he fought against Sigmar at the Battle of the River Reich. Leading from the front, Krell's forces attacked the Empire's dwarf allies. The battle raged furiously, the dwarfs stubbornly refusing to give ground against the endless ranks of undead troops. Just as it seemed the dwarf line would crumble, Sigmar cut down Nagash. In moments, the undead army was all but destroyed, as units withered and turned to dust. Only Krell and his graveguard survived Nagash's defeat. At the head of his troops, he was able to battle his way through the dwarf lines and escape. Sigmar's forces were exhausted and did not pursue Krell immediately. This proved a costly mistake. Marching night and day, Krell led what remained of his forces on a dance of destruction that cut a bloody swath across the lands. Entire communities were destroyed, towns sacked, and castles burnt to the ground. To this day, stories of Krell and his doomed legion are told across the Empire. Krell was finally cornered by Sigmar and defeated at the Battle of Glacier Lake, and his body was imprisoned in a magically constructed tomb. Centuries later, Heinrich Kemmler, the Lich Master, came upon the tomb of Krell and freed the Ancient Wight. Kemmler believes Krell to be in his thrall, but the servants of Nagash are not so easily enslaved. So again, you do have the origins of the old friend right there. Krell kind of extending past that. Krell is the old friend of Nagash. He's the old friend of a lot of the other minions of Nagash in a lot of ways here. I mean, they even talk about how Nagash really kind of I'm sorry, not Nagash, but Krell actually, he befriends Arkan the Black. He befriends Neferata during the whole entire End Times period, because he helps save Neferata during I think it's the Battle of the Skull Chasm or whatnot. The Neferata and all of her army are beset by a bunch of goblins and orcs, and he just charges down and saves the day, more or less, to bring her into the fold as a Mortarch for Nagash. And Arkan the Black is one of Nagash's original pupils. So we have Krell always kind of trying to use people as a stepping stone to get back to Nagash as a whole. But Krell, for all of what we can see in the lore, sort of always works in either someone's best interest, mainly being his towards Nagash, or just as someone's aid / mindless servitor. But that and he's got two really cool armor or magic items here. He's got the armor of the Barrows. The passage of the ages has strengthened rather than weakened this elaborate chaos plate armor. Such is the aura of entropy that surrounds it, that it has the power to decay the magic of enemy weapons in an instant. And this might be one of the mechanics that we hopefully see coming to Total War Warhammer 2. We've talked a little bit about that, how there's a lot of abilities or spells like Malekith's Mace or the Volvan Forging that outright destroy magical items. So this armor actually gives him a pretty significant a pretty significant armor save, but also it nullifies magical weapons that attack him, treating them as if they're normal. So that would be a very interesting mechanic if they did bring that to the board, as well as the Black Axe of Krell. When the Black Axe of Krell bites into flesh, it leaves behind jagged shards that swiftly eat their way into the victim's heart. So what this does here is it really kind of makes for some mechanics that are somewhat broken. When he actually wounds people, he has a chance to do additional wounds on top of it. So basically what happens is if you do more wounds and the opponent has wounds, then they don't get to have any armor saves in the tabletop. How that would translate to this, I'm not really sure. Oh no, Krell's down! But what I really see this being is just kind of your standard kind of heavy bonus to attack, kind of melee attack, melee strength, weapon that we see in a lot of other lords here, like some of the other ones that just kind of gives them a really good overall weapon to have. I'm not sure if they would add this to the game with the Norska DLC, and a lot of what I'm talking about here is speculation in hopes that they flesh out Krell a little bit more. When he becomes the Mortarch of Despair, he gets another ability that makes it so that any unit that suffers from his fear or terror mechanics, actually, it's either they suffer more wounds or they help regenerate his wounds. I can't remember 100% what it does, but it, like, as Krell gets more and more into the lore, he goes from just having Killing Blow, which all of the Graveguard have, which gives them their AP and anti-infantry characteristic. He eventually gets Heroic Killing Blow when he becomes a Mortarch as well. And his Champion of the Dead capability in this game, it only shows it as, it's just a Master of the Dead, and it gives him a replenishment to hit points. But in the actual tabletop, it actually has to do with issuing challenges. So I don't know if we're going to be seeing that come in with the Norska DLC as we're going to see with Wulfric, but necessarily he's not going to be issuing challenges as Wulfric. He's going to be locking characters down. So if Krell, though, does fight with Kemmler in the tabletop from just 8th edition, he does have the Heroic Killing Blow special rule. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Krell and how they do flesh him out. He is a really, really important character to the lore. When the end times kick off, he just goes on a fucking rampage. He kills like all these Dukes of Bretonnia, like the Duke Tancred, just goes up to, there's this big whole like epic battle about how, it's going back and forth. The undead's losing, the undead's winning, the undead's losing, the undead's winning. And then fucking Krell comes over here and just axes Tancred in the face and just spills his blood everywhere. So it's like, I'm curious to see if we're going to see a Krell that is going to be separate from Kemmler, or if this is their way of saying, please use Kemmler. We know he's not the best, but he could just use a little bit of love. I didn't really like him in tabletop either, so fuck him. But I'm really excited to try this out here. It's going to be interesting to see Kemmler in a lot of Vampire Count multiplayer armies right now, just to get Krell out there. He's going to be quite the assassin when it comes to targeting other units and really kind of focusing them down quickly. So I'm excited to see what happens with Krell here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this little blurb. It's not a very big video. I did want to just cover it though. We do have another video coming out tomorrow about the Legendary Lords of Skaven, so hopefully you'll stay tuned for that. But if you have any more questions about Krell, his kind of role in Warhammer, he was one of the first models that I ever really saw, him and Nagash as well. I remember the old Nagash model was like this really shitty looking model with, if I can find it, I'll throw up here on the video, but you got this purple robe with like this hat made of skulls, and he's got a big old skull, and it's just cheesing. He's just straight cheesing. It's a really kind of cheesy model, but then again, all the models back then were pretty damn cheesy. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this little blurb here on Krell, and it gave you a good idea of what he's going to be like in Total War Warhammer. Well, we can actually see what he's like in Total War Warhammer, but hopefully what he might be like in Total War Warhammer once the Norska DLC drops, or whatever they're going to do to hopefully improve upon him, making him his own standalone Legendary Lord of the Sword. But that is the Old Friend DLC. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one and take care.